Hello there, and welcome to my little arty corner of the internet. It's Saturday, so it's a look through my week in art, Sketchbook Saturday, because I do tend to work an awful lot more in sketchbooks than I used to. It's a lot easier to keep track of my artwork. I have to say that, because I've got filing cabinet drawers full of drawings that aren't organised or sorted. I'm quite, in some ways, I'm quite prolific with my drawings. But anyway, so I've carried on over the past week with Inktober, Inktober Tangles, because I started doing the 2 prompts, but I just wasn't inspired by the official prompt list, and I actually haven't been since the first year I did Inktober. I'd much prefer the alternative prompt lists. You've got to find something you're inspired by. I know that if you're not inspired by something, it pushes you out of your comfort zone. But I think that if you're not inspired, then it becomes a chore, a labour to do. And this is something I'm doing for pleasure. And I came across the Inktober Tangles prompt list, and I thought that sounds like a really good idea for me, because I do like patterns, and I've used them. I use Zentangle patterns, style patterns and variations, and other ones that I've created from observation from architecture and nature myself in my art, because I tend to work with patterns and motifs an awful lot, and things I've seen that are stored in my visual memory or in one of my notebooks where I keep references for various things. But what this has caused me to do is to take a pattern and then create variations of it, to examine and explore and experiment with it and change it in ways that are perhaps unexpected to me, or things I could make use of, or lessons I learn about. Ooh, don't like that. Ooh, not very good at this skill. Perhaps I need to practice it. And working in a sketchbook doing this gives me that permission to try things out, even if they don't work. It's exploring me, my artistic voice and what I like. So I think this is where I was last Saturday, which was day 9. So I had this picture here, which is upside down, but you get the idea. Typically Angela, Zentangle drawing. Still haven't added colour or anything to it. I've got no idea whether I'm going to add colour and shade, because the background's coloured. I can scan it in and I can add colour digitally, but I still haven't scanned it in, so I haven't done anything. Zach, I think, was where I was last week, and this is a lovely floral pattern. I haven't experimented more with that spirally form, but I will do, no doubt. To colour these, I've used Graphitint pencils. They're by Derwent. They're lovely. It's water-soluble tinted graphite, and can colour like coloured pencils. You get very muted, sort of, slightly coloured lines, but the magic happens when you use a damp brush. And I've been using a water brush, one of the Caran d'Ache ones actually, these, which are piston fillers, and I find these a lot easier to control how much water comes through to the brush than I do other brands. So because I only want it slightly wet, I don't want it dripping wet. I want it damp to do this, especially as I'm working in a sketchbook, because too much water will cause the paper to damage much more quickly. But just a little bit will give an awful lot of colour that will spread a long way, and I've really enjoyed doing those. It's fun. I did some gold bits there as well, because you got to. You have to excuse me, I am going to twist and turn my sketchbook today so you can see things, and I make no apologies, because that's one of the issues of working in a sketchbook. At least this is an A5 sketchbook. A4, bigger problem to show you everything, but it's fine. Day 10 was Hirari, which is a lovely tangle by Midori Furuhashi. a CZT, absolutely gorgeous. But it was one that I'd seen in the past, I'd tried drawing in the past, and I couldn't understand why it just didn't look right to me. And of course, it's that addition of shadow and highlight that helps to separate the parts of this pattern. I say of course, it took me a while to work it out, but it is using shadow and highlights that helps to separate the furls from the main part of the leaf, these furls, these folded over bits, and to make sense of what the lines are doing. You know, I can do it with thicker lines and with cross hatching or whatever if I'm ink drawing, but using colour and shadow and white brings these to life. And it is such a lovely pattern. It reminds me of a tulip almost, but you know, but more of a single, you know, sort of like, I don't know, but it's lovely. And of course, because it reminded me of a flower on its own, I had to put a stem on, and yeah, little ornamentation on it. I could have carried that on, but that's something I can do when I use these again. I say when I use them again, because I did use them in this week's colouring template because it's such a lovely pattern. As I was drawing these furls, the ones that have got the rounded edges, these here are the shapes taken from them, because I really love the way those lines move and the shape they make, so I thought they'd be lovely on their own. I tried to create a pattern here, and there's lots of question marks there because I just lost the plot along the way, because I thought they'd make a lovely arrangement themselves, but I need to practice drawing those perhaps a bit more to embed the idea. There may already be a tangle pattern like this. It's kind of familiar but not familiar at the same time, so I'm not entirely sure. But taking these individual petals and arranging them in circular arrangements, you know, so a circle of 3 and 4 there, and adding leaves and other patterns. This one's lovely. I think this leaf here, I'm not sure if that's also by Midori. I could be wrong, you know, I don't know, but it's such a lovely kind of leaf. It just fits so beautifully with that. But Mukas do, this kind of leaf does, you know, little hearts in between, which I haven't coloured, and you know, sort of like these other kinds of leaves with little beads in, little pearls or seeds. There's so many possibilities. I like this here where I've put the string of like seeds up the middle as well, because that helps to give some more structure. Or there, I did try down the bottom here to create some borders. This one started, I was going to zigzag them back and forth, but for some reason I lost the plot along the way. This is what happens when I'm not always thinking about what I'm doing. But I found them one on top of another was quite nice, like that. Having them pointing the same way was also quite nice, but alternating them didn't work out quite as nicely. Again, graphitint pencils and some white gel pens for highlights. They've got a bit of a texture, so that's going to be souffle, a Sakura souffle, white souffle, which is very opaque. Turn this around because I love Hirari so much. I started on a second page, and though it's not full, I can always come back to it and add more at a later date. This border works better than the one that I'd done on the other page. There's the one on the other page at the bottom reminds me very much of ancient Egyptian flowers that you get on the tops of columns and in borders around walls and so on. But this one, I just kept this quite plain at the back with lines. But these fit really nicely into a triangular arrangement, I thought, and gives a different feeling to a triangle. And here I've tried different shapes of petals and even turned the petal into a seed pod, because that's what I do, because I love seed pods. So that was day 10. Day 11 was, and again I'm sorry about all the twisting and turning, perhaps one day I'll work out how to stop and start again. I'd end up with too many fragments of video to deal with that. Cut them out, my head just doesn't function on that. Anyway, day 11 is Fengle, which is a Zentangle pattern. And Fengle is another one of those patterns that I've seen in the past and tried to create and just had absolutely no luck with it. Whatever instructions I saw just didn't make sense. But this one, I did look at a video by Zen Linnea on YouTube for it, and suddenly things clicked. Sometimes I need to see things done in front of me, which is something I never realised much until fairly recently, I suppose, is if I can see how it works rather than having static images in front of me, it makes more sense. But Fengle has turned out to be an interesting exploration for me. I've got 2 pages of it, which shows you how much I actually enjoyed using it. I think it's because the shapes of each petal or windmill blade coming out, a propeller blade, I don't know, it can be any kind of thing, are shapes that are familiar to me and ones that I use an awful lot. And working out how to arrange them this way was a lot of fun. And also the extraction of elements and putting elements together in different ways, sometimes successfully, sometimes not so. And there were 2, it's strange, there are 2 ways of drawing the shapes of these leaves. You start off with an S shape, and one way is you take that S shape and you go to the left and round to create the shape, and the other way is to go towards the front. I don't know whether they create anything that's distinctly different. This one was the first one I did that goes the other way, but there's something about it that makes it feel quite different, and I can't put my finger on it. I really can't. Perhaps it's just because I draw the shape differently in that direction, but it just feels different, and it feels like there's more dimension to the shape, or more, I don't know, it's just more something. But either way will work as long as you're consistent about how you do them. Here I got a bit confused along the way. It works nicely, it's worked out, but you can see these beads are pointing, if I go from that bead to that, they're pointing in a clockwise direction. This one's pointing anti-clockwise. So I mucked up, but I carried on regardless. Here I've put, used Fengle almost like grass growing out of the ground, except from the side of a wall. You know what I mean? And I've said before, and I'll say it again, I am not a big fan of putting patterns inside other patterns, particularly. But I wanted to try it with these because there's quite a large space if you just aura the leaf once, and it gives you quite a large area. So I just wanted to try, and they actually look quite nice. Obviously, I've got a pile of variations here, and it'd be nice to see what they look like in actual Fengles. I've got some here, some Shaddock, don't know. It always sounds like Shattuck is spelled S-H-A-T-T-U-C-K, but it always sounds like people pronouncing it Shaddock, as if there's D's there, and that confuses me. So, however you pronounce it. Obviously seeds are a favourite of mine, but I think things like this, which is, what's that one called? I should know. I don't. Mine's gone. That's Mooka. That's a shape that I've loved. It's a teardrop shaped leaf. It's gone. They look really lovely sat in there because it's organic with organic. But I think this one, the checkerboard of Knightsbridge and Crazy and Zeppel, work really nicely. I've even done Betweed. Betweed is a tangle pattern I've done, and I can struggle with. That one. Again, colours on these are Graphitint pencils and souffle pens for the white highlights. And for shadow, I think I have used Graphitint pencils and wash, but I also think I've used some other pencils, some you know, graphite pencils, drawing pencils, softish ones, 2Bs and 6Bs, but I think I used some chalk pastel pencils as well, soft pastel pencils, though I may have used something like carbon pencils or carbon drawing pencils, because I'm still trying to work out how to get shadow with a pencil that doesn't look mucky. So lots of Fengles there and elements of Fengle, and I loved Fengle so much, I won't twist it too quickly, I had to do another page and it was Fengling around. This is how I spent the 11th of October, just playing with Fengle really and finding out surprising things. I took some of these leaf shapes and turned them into borders. This one I really like. How I managed to get there, I don't know, but I could do it again. Using them in borders here was really a lot of fun. Really interesting shapes, and again, it depends how they go together, depends on which way you move the line. This, I never thought of doing this before. Why haven't I? It's so much fun. Extending the points of these and having them threading their way in and out of the paper. That was so much fun. And here, this dimension, it comes partly from the shapes of the elements of Fengle, but it was shading and highlighting. And what doesn't come out on the camera is, I actually drew on some of these with a burnishing pencil, just kind of create a resist for the graphy tint, and it didn't work very well, but it is very subtle. And it can be seen in person. I don't think the camera will pick it up. And here I thought, let's have a look and see what will happen if I used this is kind of like a cadent pattern where I use the shapes of Fengle but around circle grids, and that works really nicely as well. It's still Fengle, but you've got those beads in place to begin with, and there's an individual little one there. So I had a lot of fun with that. And I really do love the colours on here. Think whether graphy tint pencils work or not. Well, it depends on the colour of the background. These pages are all coloured with distress inks, just to let you know. And distress inks that I had mostly applied with makeup brushes, but as you'll see in a moment, I'd also gone on to apply them with the cut and dry foam, which puts down a lot more of the distress ink, and I really wasn't happy with this page, but I was happy with my drawings. It's, you know, it's the colour that I did, the background colour, that didn't do it for me. Yet again, another beautiful floral pattern. It's Yumimi by Shi Naritomi, and such a delicate flower. These are the original versions here, or, you know, variations on them, and I just worked with that idea and changed shapes of petals and where the furled parts were, and just tried different things out, and it was a lot of fun. Here these look almost, I don't know what kinds, they remind me of either paper or old distressed leather in some way, and I think this is why I was disheartened. And now, after a few days away, I come back and I go, actually, I could really quite like this. So I thought I'll try different colours, and I'll try, I think these are chalk pastels here, which I used, and I tried to darken the background as well in places to help to lift the flowers from the background, because they were looking a bit the samey. It was graphy tints. These are all graphy tint up here. And I think I used, for the shadow, I think I did use graphite pencil. If I tilt it and it shines, I can't see too much of the shine, but I think I did. I also liked about these, actually, was that when I was, was it here? I think it was down here. When I was dissolving, I say dissolving, it is dissolving, I think this is Inktense pencil. with the background colour, like over here, was mixing nicely, and I was getting this sort of like distressed mixture of colours. I really like that. That worked really nicely actually, and that, you know, it took me a while to work that out. It reminded me of Quink ink, fountain pen ink by Parker, which I've used when I did my A-level to do drawings, and then a wet brush to move the ink and colours, and you get all these beautiful browns and purples and blues and hints of green, because black ink is made up of a mixture of dyes to get that black colour. No two black inks are exactly the same. They're black, but there's subtle tones to each of them, and if you can separate them out, chromatography is one way. Paper chromatography works really well, or just by using a wet brush, you can actually get all kinds of interesting things going on. So yeah, side thing for you. So I really wasn't very happy with this page, so I went on to the next one, which happened to have no colour on it. Oh no, it did. Yeah, it did, but it was pinks with hints of browns. Can't remember what the colours are, the distress ink. But here I just filled the page with variations on Yamimi, using the idea of 5 petals, furls, and so on. And it just, well, it became a cornucopia of delight, perhaps. And I added colour here with water-soluble colour pencils, you know, watercolour pencils. They were Caran d'Ache, I think they're Supra colour ones, which are lovely. Then for some of these, I took the colour straight off the tip of the pencil rather than applying it to paper. Sometimes I put it on the pencil onto paper. It depended how intense I wanted the colour. And I chose not to use intense pencils because they tend to be overpowering. I wanted something that was a bit more delicate but still stood out. And with this one as well, because I wanted the flowers to stand out more from each other, not so much the background but from each other, I did add patterns behind them, but I also used an awful lot of black, which helps to separate them to some degree. I love black in drawings, black and white like this. I love the very stark kind of graphic nature that you get with them. So yeah, so I've got my own colouring page should I choose to go back and colour them. I don't know whether I will, but we'll see. Day 13 was an interesting day, another tangle. And this is Spines by Heidi Kay. And I was just thinking, what can you do with a spiral with spikes? Well, that's the original tangle, kind of. And I instantly, as I was drawing it, I was thinking, I'm going to start from the outside of it and work inwards and have the spike bits pointing inwards. So this one seems like it's growing up into a point. It's like you're looking at a cone from the top, a very spiky cone from the top. Whereas this one looks like you're looking down into a path going down and down and down into a hole. And as I was drawing some of these, I was reminded of the Sarlacc beast in Return of the Jedi, which, you know, lives in a sand pit in the desert, the Dune Sea on Tatooine, and Jabba the Hutt takes Luke and Chewbacca and Han there to throw them into the pit of Sarlacc for them to spend eternity in agony in its stomach because it eats it. And I seem to remember this big hole with these teeth sticking out. I just thought, oh no, I'm drawing a Sarlacc. But it's an interesting kind of thing. It actually it does look more like a path going in, and I found that flipping of it quite interesting. So much so, I did one spiral completely, and you know, added the spikes as I inked it in, because I did draw that one in pencil just to see. But again, what brings this to life, these patterns to life, is shadow and highlights. And here I've used a mixture of here I've used graphitint pencils. I think I've used water-soluble colour pencils, I could be wrong. Graphitint, and here gel pens. I put the colour down and I used the brush to spread it out. So this was a Unipin Signo gel pen. This one was one of the Sakura Moonlights. And as long as they don't dry, you can spread them. I think with the Uniball, they will spread even when they're dry. I think they do with the Sakura, but I made use of that while they were wet. And just use lots of different things. I used some gel pens to add Moonlight pens here, and I think that was the same pen here. It's this one, the Signo one in red. And just to add dots of colour instead of shadow, to try to highlight them, just trying a different way. But the main variation I had here were the different kinds of spikes and shapes of spikes, and I'm sure I haven't exhausted it one little bit. I'm sure there are still plenty more that can happen. I think it just depends what kind of feel you want. What I found fun with this one, because the background or the colours around were dark enough, was to use a white gel pen to colour in here the spikes. I did put some shadow over the top of this, and here I started highlighting them. I was picking the colour up from underneath because gel pens will. But that was interesting. I put some very subtle highlight shapes there, and here just used it to highlight just one of the arcs. I could have gone on and done more, but that's become an interesting pattern that I have used, and I used that one in this week's colouring template, and I will show you that in a mo. So day 14 was this one, Sea Knots by Valiganti, and it is just, it's lovely. It reminds me of medieval brooches, ornaments in manuscripts. It's like a very curvy kind of Celtic knot in some ways, because you have some overlapping, not quite in the way that a Celtic knot would overlap, but you have this looping round and over and under of the main part of the pattern here around these. And as I drew this one, I realised it was going to be long and thin. I was thinking, how can I get this to be sort of more of a squarer or a rounder shape? And that's what the little griddy thing is there, because that's how my mind was beginning to think about how I can organise these teardrops to draw the pattern from. It looks a really complicated pattern to do, and when I was drawing it in my visual dictionary as a reference before Inktober started, I did find it a little bit confusing to follow the instructions. But again, I watched a video again by Zen Linnea, and suddenly you think, yeah, I can see how it works now. And that was all really fun and really interesting. So these, I've used water-soluble pencils, I think, for all of these, as well as a graphite pencil, a white gel pen, and it is Jelly Roll 08. When I say white gel pen, that's the only pen I use. I don't think I've said it, but I actually am not sponsored by anybody, or I'm not gifted product. I buy everything myself. It's just what I find works for me. But they just so remind me of medieval brooches, or, you know, possibly even Celtic, some early Celtic arts, vaguely, but so lovely. And of course, there's so many possibilities for how you cap the ends here and the patterns you put inside and in between, and it all makes it quite different. And the shapes at the end here, I've gone for little leafy shapes at the ends, these C shapes instead of the teardrop shapes that are in the original pattern. And I like this more. It gives it that like a thick cord or thick wire, and there's a squishiness with it as well. And these highlights show up really well on the camera, I have to say that. And that was so lovely. I wanted to play a little bit more with more C knots. And so I've got another page to start. This was an unusual one because I don't use different coloured fine liners very often, but here I thought I would. I'm not happy with the highlights and things on there, but I enjoyed doing this because I wanted to see if I could put some patterns on those, the ribbons that form the main part of the pattern. And again, over here I tried that. Oddly, in those little triangles there is some tweed, not that you can see it unless I lift it up. There we go. Let's make you all seasick, is it? Can you see? Perhaps. I haven't got the light on the thing. And there's just part of a C knot there, topping the title for the page. More space for exploration because, well, why not? Then day 15 yesterday was Ing. This has never been a favourite tangle pattern of mine. It's too angular and it just feels really uncomfortable for me to look at. It makes it just doesn't feel very, yeah, I don't know, it just doesn't appeal to me, but I went with it. This one I've made it even worse because I've added so many patterns in there, but that's what I did. I used it more as an opportunity to experiment, to see what I liked or what I didn't like. And with this one I found it was just too busy. It made me feel uneasy looking at it, and it's out of balance, and everything's out of balance with it. This one in the middle I feel better about, because these outside triangles that are formed, I just shaded them with lines and colour, and then I kept the triangles that are formed by the zigzag line, because you start this off with a zigzag line and then you draw lines. If you want to see how it's done, there's plenty of videos out there. If you'd like me to show you how these are drawn, then just let me know in the comments, and I'm sure I can do things like this. No problem, no issue. It could be an interesting way to start my day, every day really, and produce a little video for you every day. But there's plenty of them out there of people doing different things. This here, I just took the zigzag pattern and just very simply filled it in with these triangles. I didn't get them going the same way as this one, so it's a bit discordant, but I actually quite like it, because in some ways you've got rectangles joining up in some way. The dividing lines here seem to disappear. These ones remain distinct because there's a disjoint between these, but here it's almost like it's part of the pattern. Part of me thinks I could bring that out by shadow now as I look at it, but I haven't done it because I don't like the zigzag and the pointy bits and so on particularly. This one's okay, but you know, it's not something I'm likely to use very often, if at all. I thought, let's see what happens if I make the zigzag curvy. Oh, that's a wave. And it is a wave shape, but it's a very irregular wave. I'm sure I could work it with an almost perfectly drawn sine wave, you know, the classic wave. But I didn't. I tried to make the wave as random as I could. And that resulted in something really interesting, because it's almost like a ribbon weaving its way down. Especially when I started adding aura lines between. I constructed this pattern with the lines that go on the outsides and so on exactly the way as this. I just made them curved instead of straight where I could, and used this central bit here, and I found this ribbon bending back and forth, which was really interesting. It wasn't all that easy for me to quite get my head around how the edging loops from one side to the other. I got there, but then I was playing with the shapes, and these here, I absolutely love this bit here. There is so much dimension and volume to it, and it's only been done with colour, no shading here at all. Haven't used graphite pencils. The only highlights are some tiny little dots of white gel pen. It's just the colours and the way that I've used colour gives it that feeling of things being tilted up and behind each other. The leaves here are really quite cute, I have to say that. And these rounder shapes lend themselves so much more to flowery or circular patterns. The one thing I don't like that I did here is for some strange reason, I put a white gel pen down here and left the lines to dry. What I normally would do, what I've been doing, is I use my finger to sort of like soften it, and it gives a much whiter highlight than chalk can in its way. So my only defence for a lot of this week is I've not been well this week, but you live and you learn. I found this interesting, was creating this edge here, almost like a step. And I did some here, whereas instead of I did put some graphite straight up there, but then I drew a line in white gel pen, then I added more graphite and then had to redraw the white line. And that's an interesting kind of way of dividing, an interesting kind of aura line. And over here you can see the same. It's done with graphite blended out. And I did put a white gel pen line there, but it's hardly noticeable. And then to today's. And today's is a grid pattern called Moonesque. And it's by Leslie Fawus. And sorry for mispronouncing your name. And this is the almost original pattern. Say almost. I don't do anything that's identical generally. But it's interesting because it's a square. It's a repeat. This square here is what repeats, but you put two rectangles in the square. So it's interesting, and it's a bit different. But I've ended up with a page full of variations, some with colour from graphite and highlights, graphitint, sorry, and highlights with white gel pen. Others here with shading done with a graphite pencil and white highlights, and some I've just left them as they are. It's interesting to me because there's possibilities like there were with Burst. Don't know if you remember Burst. I'll show you in a mo. I can move back to that one, where there are spaces for adding patterns and creating interest. So this is my version of the bare essentials of this. Here I was drawing it, I got completely confused, and I'm not quite, I've got these shapes. I didn't do anything with it. But even down to this one here, I like these shapes. They remind me of, when you put cadent, is it together? Yeah, I don't know, but I just love these kinds of shapes. Yeah, like burst. They're like bursts. But this separation into these rectangles makes it that much different. But so many possibilities. Oh, they look like butterflies. Just noticed. Oh, I got butterflies there. What am I doing with butterflies? Yeah. It just depends how you do it. And using that as the starting point is quite a lot of fun. And I did much the same with Burst, going back to day something or other, wasn't it? Yeah, here we are. Day 6, where I've got lots of variations on a theme. Couldn't do anything with the shape itself really of Moonesque, because it is that rectangular shape, though you could split it into like squares, but then the squares are a lot like this as well. But a lot of fun. So I discovered that about myself, is that I really like exploring these patterns and doing different things with it. So I've got a sketchbook here. It's becoming filled with things I can draw inspiration from. My visual dictionaries, I tend to put just one version down and leave it there, and I've never really explored them. And the same with motifs and favourite things. So this may be something I look at in the future going forward. I've got some more, just a couple more pages coloured with distress ink. I'll need to do some more soon, but I do those as I go along. And I like this colour background. Don't know what you think, but I like it as a base to work upon. Yeah, it's nice to work on white paper. And talking of white paper, I have a couple of things to show you that aren't in that sketchbook. This was this week's colouring template. I drew this one. For a couple of days this week, I've had a really upset digestive system. I've been so tired with it. And my brain hasn't felt right. I've had headaches and all kinds of things. And so I drew this over three sessions or so. And you can see, I think you can tell from the change in so on. But there's some tangle patterns crept in here. I've got spines in there, one that's pointing up and one that's going down, and some more there. Because that is a really fun border. I really like that. There's Hirari, appears there. Have I got any others? I don't know, I'm sure somebody will point them out. Well, there's this one here, the Muka and Flux. That's what that one's called. It's called Flux. And there's Yumimi as well. But then I've got a little fairy house, I suppose, a little funny cottage, towery thing, stars, and some Zentangly Dudes pumpkins, because we're getting further and further through October. Some mushrooms, the things are getting Halloweeny. Mountains that look a bit like candy corn. What on earth is candy corn? We, British, haven't got a clue. Haven't bothered Googling it. Every time I see it, I think, I must have a look and see what that is. I've got no idea. Oh yeah, and this pattern, which is Crazy Huggins. That's a favourite one of mine. Just a lot of fun there, really. Skulls. Starting to draw skulls. I start to draw skulls, there's either something wrong with me or we're heading rapidly towards Halloween. This next one is a drawing that I completed this week. This took me a number of sessions to do. I don't know how many, but I'd spend an hour here and there just adding to it. And it's very typically entangled me, but it's also different because there's some open spaces. There's not a distinct border. There is a border, but things are falling outside of it and there's no lines and so on there. These remind me very much of the arches in Romanesque churches, which is where a lot of my inspiration comes from when it comes to arches and so on. I've got one here that is actually like spines. How fun is that? I hadn't realised that. Very organic kind of patterns here. And these eyes are creeping in. The eyes are watching you. They seem to appear a lot in my more abstract work, and I'm happy for them to be there. Disembodied eyes, or perhaps not quite disembodied, because sometimes you can see faces in the drawing and work it out. But lots and lots of things there. You might recognise some patterns. This basically here is lunar flux-ish. What else have I got? I suppose you could say that's flux-ish. More flux or fescue or something. Oh, there's some Unzeppelish stuff there going on. More flux. These and so on. This is very much from Romanesque or Gothic architecture. But the swirls and things. I think I've been going through a kind of 1960s psychedelic revival period again, but sort of like my own way. And I really love drawing these intricate, very abstract, detailed kinds of things. And I haven't done anything with this. I haven't even scanned it in yet. It's the first time I've shown it, because I'm still debating whether I add colour to the original, which I don't think I'm going to do, or shadow to this one. Don't think I'm going to do. But if I scan it in, I can try things out digitally and see what happens, and keep this one as it is, because it's very much me. It's very all over the place. And then the very last thing I'm going to show you is my current. I've got a new sketchbook. It's a new one. It's a sea white one with all media paper in, which is lovely. And yeah, if you look, you can see what my personal art's going to be like for a while. There's lots of these swirls and so on here. I think this one I started here with this here, that underneath my finger, and everything's just grown out from there really. And that's how it works with me. I just start in one place and see what happens. And there's just like the way my hand likes to draw, the way lines like to flow, lots of sinuosity. That's a good word. Sinuosity. I don't even know if it exists as a word, but it does now. And if it isn't, it should be. It's one eye so far. Possibly that one. Could be taken as an eye, even though it's not there. But interesting shapes and patterns and, you know, arrangements of things. Some seed pods tucked in there. And again, you know, it's something that I'll finish. And then when it's done, I'll scan it in and see what happens. But I think sketchbooks are the way to go for me to keep my work organised. This one has an awful lot of paper in it, which is brilliant. So that's a look at my week's work. And it's been, you know, even though I've been unwell, it's been quite a busy week with it in many ways. And I'd just like to say thank you for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed having a look at everything I've done this week. And I hope you come back and see what I'm up to again. And again, if you'd like to see how to draw various patterns and things, just let me know and I'll have a look at doing sort of like some slow drawing or talking my way through it, trying to explain how things are done step by step. I don't think I can explain things like this, mind you, because it just happens. It's not a lot of conscious thought. Well, there is, but it's not in words, it's in shapes and so on. And sometimes it's just how my hand wants to move and I see what happens with that. So I'll say thank you. If you've enjoyed what you've seen, thumbs up. Please consider subscribing and look after yourselves. No matter what else you do in a day, try to find some time to be creative, whatever creativity means to you. So bye-bye for now. Bye.